Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the next episode of the IntelliCast. Today, I'm joined again with Chris, and we're going to be doing a more in-depth dive with cybersecurity insurance. And I'm excited because it's insurance. Who doesn't get excited about insurance and the conversation around it, right? So, Chris, if you want to do me a favor and reintroduce yourself to our audience.
Sure, definitely. Chris Lair, I'm EVP and CTO of a company called Cybersecurity. We're actually owned by a London-based cybersecurity and business liability insurance carrier called CFC. So sometimes you'll see CFC Response by my name, but it's one and the same. So I deal with insurance every day of my life. I don't take any days off from insurance.
I never really understood insurance as a thing, but I understand it's kind of needed nowadays. So can you explain to myself and the audience that's listening what cybersecurity insurance is used for and why it's important?
Yeah, so I'll start with what it's not used for as a substitute for security, but no. So what it
True.
is used for, it is used for the events that may happen to someone where they have some type of event that's related to technology. So, and that's a fairly general statement. It can be something obvious and direct, like your email gets compromised and you lose money because you pay somebody you weren't supposed to pay. It could be a result of email where somebody gets in and they take a bunch of confidential information. It could be a ransomware event, which you're dead in the water. It could be used also if you have a third party. So let's say you have an application that's hosted in the cloud and they're down as a result of something, and therefore your business cannot operate, thus business interruption. Cyber insurance can handle that, as well as some other stuff like insider things. So you have we've seen types where employees have gone in, or former employees have gone in and destroyed systems or caused issues and caused havoc. So that's typically what you do. So the idea behind it is A, to cover you for business interruption losses, B, to provide you technical support to help you get back up and running, and kind of C, to help you along from a legal and public relations aspect. So and I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit more, but in most cases today, you need to have lawyers help you, lawyers that specialize in these types of cases. And so that cyber coverage is there for the legal side of things, which includes if you're required to give notifications and all that kind of stuff out.
Yeah. It's cybersecurity is or insurance specifically is an ever evolving landscape. Because I know we brought this up in our introduction that we did with Wes and Kevin, and it's changed since then, which was in August. So what have you seen recently that's evolved in the insurance landscape?
Right. So the insurance landscape, and I was talking about this earlier with some other people, is that, it's a very old industry, right? It goes back to the 17th century. And so it's very old. There's a lot of companies of different shapes and sizes, and it's a very global industry. So things do not move at lightning speed in the insurance industry. But so a lot of things are reactionary, right? So with cyber insurance, that's one of the things. I mean, cyber insurance policies, a few years ago, when the claims were not as many and they weren't that expensive. Well, that changed very quickly overnight. And you saw, obviously, the number of claims increase exponentially. And you saw the sizes of the payouts on those claims also grow exponentially. And the other thing you saw kind of happening parallel with that is state laws and regulations and so forth were also being enacted, which impacted what you had to do when you dealt with these types of situations, which in turn increased the claims expenses as well. So, I would say a few years ago, you had some kind of compromise, insurance got involved, made sure you got back up, very, very quickly, paid the expenses and moved on. As those claims numbers increased, you started to see insurance get a little bit tighter on things. So they may have not been, they've been a little bit, how would you say, a little bit easier to work with. I don't know if that's the right term, but they just didn't question a lot of things. But now that things are getting much more expensive, you're seeing them stick to language in the policies that have always been there. So one example is pre-approval, right? So it used to be, let's just say you had some kind of incident, and you brought somebody in to help you out, and then you called insurance a couple of days later, no big deal. But in the policy, the wording was always there for it had to be pre-approved. But sometimes it'd be like, that's fine, that's reasonable, move on, let's go. We got you back up and running. But today you might see different people kind of say, well, that wasn't pre-approved. So, and the rates that so-and-so was charging you were way out of line, and so we're going to pay only a portion of that. You also see certain policies that may have requirements in them that you must have certain things in place, and if you don't have those things in place, it's possible that the policy will only cover you for half of what the policy says. So some examples of that are multi-factor authentication or solid backups or those types of things. And so you're starting to see a little bit more teeth put into policies. And I would say also the getting coverage in some industries is more difficult. Managed service providers are the best example. The managed service providers are finding it very challenging to find carriers out there to actually give them coverage because of the high risk that the industry is. And so, a couple of years ago, it was no big deal. I mean, it was more of a buyer's market, but it's different now. And so the premiums have gone way up, and a lot of the things. I know one of the carriers out there today, for example, when you go up to apply for coverage, it basically you have to sign an attestation letter. It's electronic, I think, that basically says you have MF, multi-factor authentication, enabled for these various things, for VPN access, for email, for administrative access, and there's, maybe a handful of things that has those requirements. If you don't attest to that, obviously you got to tell the truth. You don't even get to the next step, which is applying for a policy, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think you're seeing some of those. So that's kind of a big shift, and I think there's a little bit more focus on maybe others that may be at fault. So if you used to be no one really, they just paid the claim and moved on, but now they're asking questions like, wow, okay, your backups didn't work, why wasn't that? Well, so and so takes care of my backups. Okay, well, let's talk to so and so and find out why your backups weren't working. And so there's a little bit more challenges in looking at the service providers or vendors that may be responsible things and going after them to reimburse some of the expenses that have accumulated during the event.
Yeah. So, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but insurance itself is a giant game of risk mitigation, right? Their ultimate goal is to take the small-ish monthly sum that you pay them, or 6 month sum, depending on how it's set up, and and roll that into how much they think they're going to pay out and when they think something will pay out. And if that number is higher than what it's going to take to pay out, then they consider that a success, right? And they can make money.
That's right. So the premiums need to outweigh the claims, right? That's what it really comes down to. And there, there's information out there. It's not hard to find where they publish all the different carriers and how much premiums they brought in versus how much they had to pay out. And I mean, there's some carriers out there that took a bath, right, on an annual basis. I mean, on those particular, the insurance policy world, every day I learn about some new type of policy that I didn't even know existed, 100%. Right? It's crazy, right? What they cover, but yeah, on the cyber side, it's really important. So some of these carriers have taken baths, and it's not a good thing when that happens for the industry as a whole, because what a lot of people don't understand is you may get a policy from a carrier, but there's multiple underwriters on that policy on the back end. So you might have a policy that's ABC Incorporated as your insurance carrier, but they're not footing the complete bill on that. There's others completely, involved in the underwriting. I mean, the term again has been around for hundreds of years, and so you even back to the days where they were insuring cargo on ships. That's where it all started. You had various people taking on that risk at different proportions, right? And so that's the saying. That's the game it is today. And the problem is with cyber, is it's the risk continues to increase, right? It's not something that's going away. It's not like where you have a hurricane happens once every 5 years or something like that. I mean, this thing is just a steady increase of attacks, and it's getting uglier every day with no, there is no eye of the storm when it comes to cyber right now.
No, and it's and there is a lot of just easy things to do nowadays. MFA being one of them, training with your staff being another. And it is all about for a company risk mitigation. You want to mitigate your own risk to be liable for the problem, right? You don't want to be the cause of the issue. You want to have that. You don't want to be hit with an issue at all, but the attack surface that you provide is based on your personal risk. So if you have employees who aren't trained to not click on things they don't know about, or they don't have MFA to secure themselves, it's just you're just opening yourself up to more risk, and it's less likely you'll be able to easily find cybersecurity. I mean, I'm sure someone will insure you, but the rate you'll get is going to be not worth the trouble. It would just be easier to turn on MFA.
It's interesting. You're right. So the premiums are going to be higher, and the coverage they may give you will be a lot less, right? Mm-hmm. So you may be a company. I'm saying, I'm going to go out there and look for $3 million worth of coverage. The max you can get's $1 million, or the max you may get's only 500,000, right? And so that really stinks. And so, or it could impact your ability based on the premium. You may have to do a higher deductible. And in the cyber world, high deductibles stink. I mean, not coming from an insurance perspective, but coming from a response perspective. When we have somebody and they have like a $25,000 deductible, they're counting pennies. And in a cyber attack, you don't want to be able to count pennies. And so, there's a lot of things that kind of impact that. And there's not, it's not like a car where they say, well, you're driving a sports car with a V12 and blah, 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 and therefore you're interested, and you're a 31-year-old male living in major city, your rate's this. Just doesn't work that way exactly like on the business side of things, right? And the other thing is people wonder, well, why can't I just do a bunch of security things and show my carrier about those security things, and then that'll impact my rate? It just doesn't work that way either, because it's just that's not the way the product works. They try to sell a product that kind of they can sell to the masses, and they don't want to have a bunch of moving levers, because these little insurance brokers out in the world that are doing their best are selling these policies, and they're not technical people, so they don't need to be they don't want people to try to explain, well, I have a Palo Alto firewall and not this. The broker's gonna be like, I don't, what does that mean to me? And so there's just it's just a different a different way of trying to sell a product and understand a product. So it's tough, because people, especially managed service providers, and Kyle, you and I were in the same place last week in Orlando, and surrounded by service providers, and that's a difficult thing, because you have service providers out there that are doing really good things, but they're being measured the same way everybody else is. Mm-hmm. So they can't really prove that from a security perspective they're better than the guy next door. They're all being kind of risk rated the same. And so I know big MSPs that do a really good job, they don't even get the opportunity to renew. The carrier just sends them a letter and says, you're not getting renewed. They had no claims. They had nothing on their record that would cause that to happen. It's not like in a car where you had 3 wrecks last year, they're going to drop you. In this case, they just say, you're an MSP, we're not going to have anything to do with you.
Yeah. And we're definitely lucky enough to have insurance. So we've done what we can to partner with them, because it's important to have. I mean,
yes.
If you think about just think about the amount you can insure yourself for, like the 3 million, 1 million, $500,000. How much are you impacted from a business perspective if you go down with an issue? You may hit the deductible, you may not, but you could, I mean, if you're down for a week, I mean, you still have staff you have to pay. You still have software you have to buy. You still have things, you still have to continue business, and you're going to lose money while that's happening. The insurance is specifically there to help you to do that.
Yeah, it is. And one thing people have to understand is really the definition of business interruption. And so it's not just, I think the Aflac commercials kind of fool people into thinking that's what it's all about, and it's not really that. So, I mean, I'm not a licensed broker or anybody else that can, get into the details of business interruption. But one thing I would tell people is really make sure you understand the definition of business interruption and what that covers. Because a lot of people think, hey, well, I'm paying my employees, they're going to pay my employees. Nah, that's not the way it works, right? You have to demonstrate that you're actually losing money. So if you're down a week, do you really lose money? I mean, is there sales that you lost? Is there, whatever happened? That so you really need to understand that business interruption, because the one thing I don't like to see, and it happens all the time, is people don't know what their insurance is all about until they get into an issue, and then they find out these things after the fact and they get really upset about it. And
Yeah.
I'm just trying to help you get back on your feet, and they're yelling and screaming at me for stuff that I didn't have any control over, and I just want to say, well, you should have asked these questions ahead of time.
Yeah.
It's your fault for being surprised.
Yeah. You always want to try to be as educated as you can, especially like this is like any decision, any other business decision you want to make, is you want to try to be as educated as you can, ask those specific questions, and even give scenario examples if you can,
And,
to help facilitate those answers.
and carriers are not looking to not pay. Well, that's not the deal, right? The people are always afraid that the carriers are trying every angle not to pay. That's not the case. They really they understand that they're important. They understand that people have policies and they need to be used. The idea, though, is to try to do what we can to minimize people having to file claims in the first place. And so that's part of this deal, is just trying to educate people and trying to get people just to understand what they're doing and what they're not doing, and so they're not in a position, or if they do have to file a claim, the impact. I mean, you made a point just a second ago about the size of the insurance policy. I mean, people don't. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that, right? I mean, there's the cost of recovery. There's, if you have a ransomware payment that you have to make, that's going to be factored in there. Those things usually aren't cheap these days. There's the attorneys. And then there's the costs of the notifications and any kind of costs associated with legal filings. And then if you get sued, you got to have some money left over to deal with that as well.
Yeah.
So knowing those coverages and making sure they have enough. I mean, I think service providers, to use them as another example, they're the ones that find out the hard way, because for them, they need more coverage than everybody else, usually just because of what they do.
Yeah. So let's say, for example, one of our clients who has an issue and has insurance. How you, as an expert, would you determine if it's good to engage our insurance provider with that policy, or if it's good to just not with, at what point is it good to engage them versus when it's just not really important?
So that's a good question. So in most cases with policies, you can simply put them on notice. You don't necessarily have to file a claim. So you can say, hey, look, and it's smart to do that. You say, look, and this happens a lot with people that have some third party issue, like, hey, we just got notification from a third party that something's happened. We're going to put you on notice right now. We don't know what the outcome of that's going to be. We may reach back out to you because we find out there's some bad stuff and we need to go ahead and file a claim, or maybe a nothing burger and we go on our way. So you can just do that. Just because you make that phone call or that email or that web form or whatever the heck you use, whatever modality you use, you can just put them on notice, and definitely do that. But the other side of things is if there's something pretty obvious, right? I mean, email compromise, ransomware attack, some kind of data breach. You have somebody that says, hey, look, we have your data, and they give you some screenshots of your data. You don't want to mess around, and you want to call your carrier as soon as possible. And you want that carrier to kind of lead the charge, tell you what needs to be done and what does not need to be done. We've had, more than more than one instance where people have either decided to do their own thing or hire their own people and call us a month later, and by then, the whomever they called didn't do things correctly, missed some things, whatever, and or they didn't have any attorney-client privilege invoked at that time. They didn't have an attorney involved because they felt they didn't need one, or didn't even know they needed one. And so, yeah, so in today's world, you definitely want to get in front of that, make sure that the carrier is involved, and make sure that the carrier is giving you, and all the carriers that I'm aware of do a good job of this, of getting in front of it and clarifying things for you. Yes, you have coverage for this. No, you don't have coverage for that. If you need this, we're going to bring in this third party to assist you, and that type of thing. And especially if you're an SMB. I mean, just like in anything else, when you're an SMB, you're not going to have as much leverage as the big boys have when dealing with their insurance policies. That's just real world. I'm not going to paint the picture any prettier than it is. So really, you don't have as much freedom, if you want to use that, to kind of do what you think should be done. But that's not a bad thing. I mean, again, these carriers are looking out for your best interest. When a carrier brings in a breach attorney, also known as a breach coach, those people are very vetted, and they're engaged with you, the client. They've just been approved for use by the insurance carrier, but they are not there representing the carrier. They're directly engaged with you, just as if you walked down the street and hired them. And so that's what you want to do. So that's why you want to have all those pieces in place and do things the right way and by the book, because every attorney that I work with is preparing for the worst, but hoping for the best. And that's the angle you got to take. And you need to have that attorney involved as soon as possible, so they make sure that they're able to represent you as completely and thoroughly as they want to.
Yeah, that was going to be the question I was going to ask. As a third party to some of our most all of our clients, we obviously would need to know as IT to put in stopgaps so that anything that may be happening currently, it stops happening currently, right? Any breach, any lockdown, whatever needs to be locked down, and do whatever measures we need to take. But if we do engage, if an insurance company is engaged, do they recommend third parties generally? Do they bring in a third party that they'll generally just pay for, that you don't have to worry about because it's included in your coverage? Is that how that works?
Yes, that is exactly the way it works. And I really try to, when people are like, well, I'm comfortable with this person or I've used this, there's actually some legal reasons why you don't want to use existing people. I mean, there's case law that's been in the last, 2 years where, a company has an existing relationship with a security company, and the security company does all the work, and a judge rules that none of that is confidential under attorney-client privilege, that it's all 100% discoverable because the company had an existing relationship with that security company, and the attorney came in after the fact. And so there's some legal reasons why that's but the other reason is just to make things simple. And this is what I tell people is, look, if you want to go battle the carrier over the fact you want to use this company over the company the carrier's brought in, that's all for you. But why do that? They're giving you a company that's already been pre-approved, that knows the process. When they send statements of work, they're going to be worded correctly, they're going to be priced correctly. No adjuster is going to get in the way and question things. The companies that they bring in are vetted. They have experience. They do this all the time. So, I understand that you may be comfortable with somebody, or it may be your cousin's brother-in-law or whatever the case may be. But just go with the flow, because it works out that way. Again, think about it from the carrier's perspective. They want the third parties involved that are going to get things done the quickest to minimize the impact. Like,
Yeah.
from a forensics perspective, they want a qualified forensics firm that's going to do a good job. So if something does come out of it, like let's just say an attorney general comes after you, or you get sued, that stuff is buttoned up real tight. They don't want to go with somebody they don't know that may screw that up, and may cause more litigation or more expenses as a result of litigation. So, I mean, everything that these things are designed to do are designed really with the policyholder in mind. So, um, just do what they say. That's an easy rule.
Yeah, I mean that's it's a good example. Now, if say, could we recommend like a third party that they partner with? Like, let's say
Hmm.
Solus. Like, I'm
Oh yeah.
sure you partner with security companies or,
Hmm.
excuse me, insurance companies. Like, if there is a known third party, we could then partner. We or at least ask,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yes.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be John's security shack down the road.
Hmm.
It still may you still be able to make a recommendation, but it's going to be up to the carrier at most point, and you kind of want them to be able to make that decision because at the end of the day, if everything goes right, they're the one footing the bill, right?
Yeah, and usually the carrier is going to pay those third parties directly. It's
Yeah,
not going to be one of those things where you're going to get the invoice, you got to pay, then you got to submit it to the carrier to then reimburse you. That's just another. That's just another
a lot of
process that you're
overhead.
going to have to deal with, right?
Yeah.
So when we work cases, all the invoices go directly to the carrier, and then the carriers pay us. So that's just kind of the way it works. So
Yeah, and you also have the like some businesses who are hit by an issue don't always have the cash required because security is expensive, right? Forensics and data analytics like that are expensive, and you don't always have that cash lying around, especially if you're in the dealing with an incident.
that's right.
So that it's
Yeah,
always to keep that in
and
mind.
and I don't personally like chasing down money. And so, we have people come to us that's are either, they don't have insurance or whatever, and we help them. And, I want, my deal is I love helping companies get back up and running,
Mhm.
or organizations, right? That's just me. But, when they either push back on your bills too high or we can't pay you yet or whatever, I'm like, man, you're just making it hard for me to do that for others because on the insurance side we get paid for sure.
Yeah,
On these types of things, it's a little bit more difficult. So again, yeah, you're right. Going to your carrier and asking for approvals can happen. I mean, the thing today is it's so busy out there. I mean, almost every IR firm that's worth their weight in gold or salt or whatever you want to call it, they're not hurting for business. They're not
no,
on the road with a panhandling
yeah,
and that
incident
type of stuff.
response is just like booming right now.
But there's a lot of people calling themselves incident response firms, and you have to be careful about that. I mean, there's been firms
Mhm.
that somebody's hired because they Googled them or whatever, and they're either prohibitively expensive and they don't know what they're doing, or they just go out and install a bunch of tools in your network. They don't ask the questions that around legal. They don't ask, they're not really versed on things like what to do from a forensics collections perspective. And they just stick a bunch of tools out there and think that's what it's all about. And I'll even go one step further is uh, even outside of those incident response companies, a lot of people call their antivirus vendor, and their antivirus vendor says they do incident response. No, I mean it's usually prohibitively expensive. The rates they charge are ridiculous. They usually have some huge just retainer without even counting the hours that they do. And the work product that they produce is not what you want to see from a forensics perspective. I mean, it's got a lot of extra stuff in there that you don't want. I mean, that's a legal document.
Mhm.
You want that legal document to say the things, and that's it. Doesn't need to say anything else. It doesn't need to have any subjective stuff in there. Doesn't need to have any recommendations in there. And a lot of times, what you see with the antivirus vendors is that they do that, and they're very loose with what they communicate. And again, they're not telling you to bring an attorney in and that type of stuff either. So I would definitely buyer beware is a good rule there.
Wow, that's new to me. I didn't. I'm not a AV has its place in the security stack, but incident response is not really where I'd place them. Uh,
Yeah, I know. Now there's some like CrowdStrike. Look, not gonna.
oh yeah,
CrowdStrike's been doing IR before they kind of did endpoint, right? So
oh yeah,
that's a little bit
CrowdStrike's
different of
great.
a story.
Yeah,
Yeah, those guys are like the big
I'm
dogs.
thinking
But
Norton or
yeah, Norton. Yeah, I'm
McAfee.
not gonna. I don't want to. I don't want them to come after me. But yeah, you get what I'm saying. And then the other thing is with the other mistake I see is companies that are small choose very large IR firms. And that doesn't make a lot of sense either because these our IR firms are really kind of more designed to deal with either large mid market or enterprise type clients.
Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
bringing some giant monster IR firm in to handle like a 25-person company. You're just not going to get that kind of tender loving care. And I will tell you, hopefully these big dogs don't come after me either, but you're not going to get the most senior of person assigned to your case. You know what I mean? They're
Yeah.
reserving they're reserving those for their big dogs. So, just like with anything else, find people that know what they're doing and specialize in organizations of your size.
Yeah. Um, and I think that about wraps it up. Is there any other tips you have when dealing with cybersecurity insurance or cyber
Yeah,
insurance in general?
definitely. I mean, I know a lot of people when I talk, they have long-standing relations with relationships with their brokers. I mean, it's just like I don't know, the person that cuts your hair or whatever. They've been using them
Yeah.
forever, your dentist or whatever. And they're great. I mean, we work and talk with a lot of brokers, and every single one of them are out there for the best interest of their clients. But don't be afraid to ask the tough questions around cyber. You definitely want a broker that understands that gets you the right amount of coverage, that understands the things that you need in a policy and don't need in a policy. So, like, again, a lot of brokers are good. Brokers have resources upstream from them that they can call on to help them if they get in a situation where they're maybe can't speak to it and they need help with that. But really be certain around cyber because it's very specialized. You want to get it right. And the last thing you want to do is have to go back to a broker who you've used for years, who's done a great job with you on every other policy, but in this particular one, unknowingly did you wrong, and basically causes a permanent strain in that relationship.
That's good information. And you'd obviously recommend cybersecurity or cyber insurance for everyone, right?
Yeah, definitely for everyone. It's kind of funny because you'll get a questionnaire from somebody that says, "Hey, we want to see that you have proof of your insurance," and I'm like, "I want to see that you have proof of insurance too."
Yeah.
So yeah, having cyber is super important for everybody. It's very affordable, even with premiums going up. The feedback that I get from people, and I talk about this all the time. Hell, I've been on the road for the last month talking to different groups and organizations about this, from municipalities to small businesses and so on and so forth. And everybody still says, yeah, that it's gone up and that stinks, but it's still very affordable compared to some of the other products that they have to buy.
Well, that's good to know. Chris, thank you again for stopping by and joining us today on the podcast. And who knows, maybe we'll get to have another conversation in a few months because it's changed again.
That's exactly right. And again, hopefully, I mean, I think it always changes for the better. You just
Yeah.
have to look through the right lens. But yep, I'm more than welcome to come back, Kyle. You know I love doing these things with you.
All right. Well, everyone who's listening or watching, you guys have a fantastic day and we'll see you next time.